If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout. There is a classic definition of insanity. Trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. We expect this kind of thinking when it comes to problem solving, when it comes to politicians, people who work in bureaucratic organizations, big businesses that are out of touch with reality. Just go look at how many major corporations decide to wade into social culture war issues in the political sphere and then are surprised when the public turns against them. But we shouldn't expect this from the church. After all, the church, being established by Jesus Christ on the rock of Peter, you would think would take a broader view of things, maybe understand that getting involved in shady dealings with things is probably not the best way to instill faith, instill trust, and actually operate in a way that is in keeping with the things that we profess with our lips. Right? You would think that. We have a story today of the Vatican getting involved in more real estate deals. If you're sort of new to all of this, a few years ago, a cardinal by the name of Becciu, who is now dealing with a court process in Italy, he was at the center of real estate speculation deals involving your tithing dollars being used to buy land, to being used for funding of Hollywood movies. Yeah, they were involved in that too. The movie Rocket Man, the movie about Elton John of all people. Perhaps his story hits a little close to home for some of these prelates. That was all what was your money was being used for. And to a degree, it makes sense. Hear me out on this. The reason it would make sense for the Vatican to be involved with putting tithing dollars into some sort of financial venture is because they have a duty to make sure the treasures of the church, the material treasures of the church, are preserved and grow for future needs. In the same way that it's not unreasonable for a person who works for a living to be expected to save for their own retirement or their children's needs. Those are not unreasonable things. It gets a little dicey when you talk about church money. But that is where we are. The church is run by people who have a bad track record of this. Cardinal Becciu is in a court process right now in Italy. He looks like he's the fall guy for things that were well above and beyond his own competency. And the Vatican is doing this again. We got this story from Crux magazine, who professes to be taking the Catholic pulse, and they gave us a headline for a story that covers a lot of different things, but here's the headline for the story for those looking for it. Parolin helps U.S. bishops on Vigano, church-state drama in Italy, and a new real estate deal. I covered the Vigano issue in my live stream earlier this week, but the fact of the matter is that Cardinal Pietro Parolin is considered papabile. His name usually shows up on the list of people who would likely succeed Francis, especially on those lists of people who could continue the work of Francis. To give you an idea of the kind of person we're dealing with here, he is the Cardinal Secretary of State, which is sometimes called the office of the Vice Pope. He's not an insignificant figure in the Roman Curia. Here are the details of the real estate deal. From the article, quote, "The last time the Vatican got involved in a complicated real estate deal involving millions of dollars, it didn't end especially well. A stopped purchase of a former Harrods warehouse in London, originally slated to be converted into luxury apartments, triggered the trial of the century that ended in the conviction of 9 defendants, including Cardinal Angelo Becciu, for various forms of embezzlement and fraud. Now the Vatican appears to be heading once more into the real estate breach, negotiating the acquisition of a shuttered Roman hospital as the new headquarters of the papally sponsored Bambino Gesù Pediatric Clinic. The deal was announced in mid-February, and new details emerged this week in a report by the online news site Roma Today. The facility in question is the sprawling Forlanini Hospital in Rome, built in the 1920s and 30s as the world's first major facility devoted entirely to the treatment of tuberculosis, which over time evolved into a general service hospital until it was closed in 2015 amid disrepair and ballooning deficits. The 70-acre campus, which at its peak has more than 4,000 bed spaces for patients, originally was slated to be remodeled and returned to use as a public facility. Those plans, however, were never realized, and in February a signing ceremony was staged in which a deal was linked to turn over at least part of the facility to the Vatican to allow the Bambino Gesù to expand, something described as impossible as its current location. Under the agreement, the Vatican is supposed to buy a dilapidated building and its grounds from the Lazio region, which owns the property, quote, at a price to be established, reportedly around $70 million, and the construction of a new hospital would be paid for by Italy's Workplace Accident Insurance Agency, INAIL. In turn, it would then rent the new facility to the Vatican, which would be considered extraterritorial Vatican property under the terms of the 1929 Lateran Pact. Much about the financing remains mysterious, including the role of the Italian version of a workers' compensation program in a hospital building project. It's also not clear how the reported sale price was established, since estimates for the value of the property are said to range between $450 and $600 million. It remains to be seen if anybody will be charged with crimes when the dust settles, but for now it's clear the deal isn't playing to universally positive reviews. An Italian citizens group, among others, is leading protests, claiming that a facility which is supposed to be for public use is being sold off on the cheap to the Vatican. In part, those complaints reflect the fact that the deal was signed on the Vatican side by Italian Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State, while representing the Italian government was Cabinet Secretary Alfredo Mantovano, who also happens to be a lifelong Catholic and the former president from 2015 to 2020 of the Italian branch of the Papal Foundation Aid to the Church in Need. The suggestion, therefore, is that Mantovano has delivered a sweetheart deal to his ecclesiastical buddies at the expense of the public interest. No timetable has been announced in terms of when the move by Bambino Gesù will be complete, and much may yet depend on how public reaction plays out. One would assume that, post-London, sensitivities in the Vatican to the possible ramifications of the real estate deals are also higher. End quote. Now, what that article doesn't tell you is that the Vatican actually had a whole bunch of money stuck in that hospital for years and years, if not decades beforehand. This is a long-running real estate scheme involving high-ranking Vatican officials. This hospital caused quite the stir in years past when it was revealed that millions upon millions of dollars the Vatican had sunk into the hospital, either to try to save it or to try to redevelop it. And now the Vatican is going to be owning the facility, although at least for now it looks like the deal will prevent them from being able to sell the thing, to flip it on the market. It might be kind of a cynical sounding thing to say, but quite frankly, are we surprised, or should we be surprised that we need to ask these kinds of questions? Because I don't think anybody really says it's a bad idea for the Vatican to own a hospital that could reportedly be used as a children's hospital. I don't think anybody has a problem with that. That would fit perfectly within the Church's corporal works of mercy in the world. The Vatican's track record with real estate isn't exactly comforting. I've reported many times here how groups of women religious typically will have their monasteries suffer an apostolic visitation that then leads to the ouster of the head of the religious order and the dispersal of the nuns or forced retirement of the nuns, the seizing of the land by the Vatican, and then the land being sold at the mutual profit of the diocese, wherever it is, and the Vatican. This has happened many, many times. I've reported on the story quite a few times in the history of this channel. Those kinds of stories make any real estate deal something that we have to keep an eye on, especially considering that it was one of the biggest scandals in the Church's recent history under Francis was the London real estate deal that was also tied to the production of a movie about a figure that no Catholic dollar should ever go towards funding. I'm curious, though, do you think this is an innocent deal? Do you think this is just much ado about nothing? Or is this another case of here we go again? Get ready for more corruption. They can't keep their hands out of the cookie jar. Let me know which side of this you are on. And Let me know in the comments what you think about this, and as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.